creates real effects in the individual's personality. So it is just not an absence of knowledge that's occurring when you and I talk your history. You are put into a state of consciousness, and many of your abilities are wiped out and destroyed as a result thereof. That is why your history is not being taught to you correctly, so that your potential will be forever undeveloped as a people, and you will not challenge those people who rule over you. And even though this world is only ruled over by 10% of its population in European, the other 90% in order to be ruled over must literally be out of their minds. You as a people have to be crazy to be in the position that you're in. Your state of consciousness has to be one that is deceptive, has to be one that is filled with lies and misinformation and disorientation. How can you inhabit the richest continents on this earth and be the poorest people living on it? How can Japan, with no resources at all, be seen as the richest and most powerful nation on this earth, except that those people who have the earth's natural wealth see themselves as poverty-stricken and are poverty-stricken in their consciousness? You will see later on then that if the education doesn't wake you up from this, you are still going to be servants. You think that your ability to choose various courses at this school and other schools, your capacity now to choose whether you will be a computer scientist or this or that, means that you have advanced beyond your great-great-grandparents who were slaves. You have not advanced one bit. We don't have time to talk today about what I call the European constants, those things that remain the same despite all the apparent changes that occur in the world. As a matter of fact, the changes that occur in the world are meant to maintain the very basic constants. Integration is not just an idea of black people. It is an idea pushed by the white ruling class. You have to understand that it is to their advantage to run this game on black people's minds. You must understand that the slaves were not mere field hands and house servants. You had slaves with many skills, all types of skills. Carpenters and iron workers and millwrights and shipbuilders and you name it, they had it. Many did not just work on the plantations or in the house. They actually went out and followed professional jobs and brought the monies back to their slave master. So the idea that you're picking up a skill does not advance you any farther than they were. Because in the end, the basic constant remains the same. And what is that constant? Working for someone else's profit.
Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.
Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Truth to Power Talk with your sister, Dr. Maat. Thank you for joining another powerful discussion. And tonight I have with me another powerful guest, but he is no stranger to the community. Baba, Sababu, Plata, how are you doing tonight, Baba?
I'm doing quite well. Very, very well.
Well, Baba, thank you so much for coming on the platform, because I know you're not normally on the platforms, and so, you normally keep a very, very low profile. And so I give thanks, that you said you made an exception for me. And so I do give thanks for you, Baba, for being with me and being with my listeners tonight. I also want to give you your flowers while you can smell them. I give thanks for you for keeping up the legacy, continuing the legacy of Dr. Amos Wilson. So family, tonight we are going to honor Dr. Amos Wilson. All right, I'm going to read his bio, and you can find his bio in the back of the newly released book by African World Info Systems. All right, African Info World Systems, The Psychology of Self-Hate and self-defeat. So his bio is, I think, the second to the last page. All right. And so let me cut my music while I read his bio. Professor Amos N. Wilson is a former social caseworker, supervising probation officer, psychological counselor, training administrator in the New York City Department of Juvenile Justice, an assistant professor of psychology at the City of New York. Born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 1941, Amos Nelson Wilson completed his undergraduate degree in psychology at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. He migrated to New York, where he mastered at Fordham University and the New School for Social Research before attaining his doctorate from Fordham, Bronx, New York, in the field of general theoretical psychology. Dr. Wilson taught courses in general, developmental, adolescent, abnormal, social, personality, and cognitive psychology, thinking and writing skills development, provided personal and academic counsel, researched and designed youth and adult rehabilitation programs. His ambitions and magnanimity furthered as he availed himself for numerous appearances at educational, cultural, and political organizations and universities throughout the U.S., also in Canada and in the Caribbean. He readily tutored at the Harlem School of Africana Studies, a community founded by the eminent First World Alliance. Brother Amos's activities transcended academia into the field of business, owning and operating various enterprises in greater New York. Colleagues, lay and professional, recently acclaimed him the ultimate Garveyite. Ashe, a prolific writer, Wilson has penned other pertinent works in education, economics, and therapeutic psychology, which we hope to share with readers and admirers in the near future. Oh man, I do have a sound effect, Baba, but it's not ready. But I wanted to just drop a bomb for Dr. Amos Wilson. He's actually one of my intellectual heroes, one of my intellectual warriors. And again, who better to talk about the life and legacy of Dr. Amos Wilson, than speaking with you, Baba, who was his friend, and his business partner, and the editor, I believe, for a lot of his books. You did a lot of the editing, the publishing, the printing. And so I had to get you on the show tonight, Baba, to talk about Dr. Amos Wilson. So family, right now, take a moment out. I see that you're coming in and I see all of the comments in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. So take a moment out to share this show. Let's get the views up. Baba's going to be dropping a lot of information tonight. So please be sure to share this show. And if you're watching on Facebook, head on over to YouTube and subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification bell so that as soon as I go live, you will be notified. All right, so Baba, you ready to rock and roll?
Fine, my sister. Let's go.
Let's go. Okay, so this is my first question for you. And this question is based on a lot of the lectures and that I've listened to of Dr. Amos Wilson, and also his books that I have over here to my left. I literally have, this is my Dr. Amos Wilson collection right here. And so I'm a huge fan of his work, of your work. And so this question is based on a lot of the things that I've read and listened to. Dr. Amos Wilson spoke profusely in his writing and lectures about what it means to be conscious and the role consciousness plays in the liberation and advancement of African people. And so, Baba, my first question to you is, what did it mean to be conscious? What did Dr. Amos Wilson, how did he define consciousness? Because many of us will say, oh, to be conscious is to be aware. But, we're kind of oversimplifying that, and so what does it mean to be conscious, and what is the role that consciousness plays in the liberation of African people?
First of all, sis, I want to say it's a distinct pleasure that you invited me to be part of your family.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, and though it's not something I do quite often, for you, we make all the exceptions in the world.
I
The
appreciate it, Baba.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, the before we get even to the question of consciousness,
Mhm.
I think it's really a developmental skill. You have to put the time in to acquire consciousness. It just doesn't drop out of the sky. And in meeting Amos, we thought that we were pretty much on track in terms of our development. We had gone to Kemet, we had done so many things up at the first world, and attended so many of the lectures out here. But in meeting Amos, he delved into another realm of consciousness.
Yes.
You see, with Amos, we had heard a bit of Naim Akbar and some of the other psychologists, and the brother who did the psychopathic racial personality, you know. But remember that the psychologists were few, and then to encounter Dr. Wilson with developmental psychology of the Black child, and he taking us back to the root, right? Those developmental years as to what shapes consciousness. For us, this was the platform that we were able to build upon. And in reviewing and in him articulating these points in developmental psychology of the Black child, it actually put in place the foundation as to what we really needed. You see, it's one thing getting the history, but you know, that platform where you can build brick by brick by brick, and understand who you are, where you came from, and what your responsibilities were, and the socio-historical setting in which you are functioning. This, to me, is that bedrock that really starts that wheel of consciousness churning into productive work.
Mm. Powerful, Baba. Powerful. So, about how did he define consciousness? What did it meant to be conscious?
Uh, well, one of the things is, I would think, one, in the piece that you highlighted, which is knowing the path that you have traveled.
Mhm, mhm.
Yes, knowing that path that you traveled, and I think in the falsification of African consciousness, where he delved into the different types of consciousness,
Yes.
right? And and one of the things that I think I liked first is that Amos had almost a hypnotic spell that he would put on you.
Yes.
Yes, it was you know, it was like being transformed in real time, and you will sit there locked in. Now this,
Yes.
right, and in a sense, Amos working with you, dealing with lifting your sense of self, your sense of history, your sense of purpose, and also within that consciousness, it was required that you displayed a certain kind of humility.
Mhm, mhm.
Right. It was not a braggadocio, a know-it-all type of approach, but it was having a, having a type of accommodation, a magnanimity that, in a sense, you would share with your fellow being. That sense of love, understanding that maybe that person may not have had your degree of expertise or experience, but always it was a welcoming of you into the fold. And within that, and that communal spirit, for me, is what drove you to now starting a major exploration into self, right? Into self critique, and also then building that self. And we see that amplified in all of his works.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Baba Sababu. Uh, and so, what is the role consciousness plays in the liberation of African people? What do you think? How did he? How did he? Or what did he say about using consciousness as a tool? For our liberation and advancement.
Well, the in this work, which would be uh, therein is contained one of his last presentations, where he dealt with consciousness as a tool of liberation,
Mm-hmm.
right, as a prelude to blueprint for Black Power. I found that Amos, beyond even dealing with consciousness and purpose, I think he dealt with the ability to exorcise from you that which makes you unconscious.
Mm.
Yes, consciousness is a cleansing process too.
Mm.
It requires getting rid of a whole bunch of nonsense, and becoming trained, keeping your focus and filling in those gaps in your consciousness with real knowledge. It was not about, just you know, crap. Good. He would first emphasize a fundamental knowledge of history, whether it was Reconstruction history, ancient Nile Valley, Mali, Songhai, Ghana, Monomotapa, good. Whether it was a solidness of even the history of us in the Caribbean and elsewhere. And to me, that bedrock of the historical platform. Now from there, you can get into the consciousness of religion,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
of faiths. But if you don't know it, just like when Dr. Ben, just to veer from Amos just a bit, when Dr. Ben would introduce us to the 42 norms and the 42 laws that existed before the Ten Commandments, right? That Moses received in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just that alone showed that there was some type of thought existing in the world, that your world did not start with a Judeo-Christian foundation as we had been taught, but that our history went much further back,
Teach, Baba.
right? And there were philosophical thoughts, there are monuments to show, there are writings to show, and people like Dr. Ben, and they took us to these places where we would see these occurrences. So, in terms of my tools, what I found important was to have a fundamental understanding of the ancient world. And on that platform, you would traverse Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and all the others coming up the road, Catholicism, Anglicanism, Protestantism, and everything else. So now no one could run their game on you.
Come on. That's right, Baba.
Right? No one could run their game on you. You were solidly placed for any type of discussion. And therefore, you were able now to articulate with reason and humility your points, hold your point well, and also be open to new information coming in. So, in a sense, consciousness required that you become a critical thinker. And
Hold on, say that one more time, Baba. Consciousness requires you to become what?
that you become a critical thinker.
Hold on, Baba. Please continue, Baba.
Yes. and and uh, and and for those of you who may have heard Amos's presentation on critical thinking, he did a presentation over at City College. It might have been around 1986, 1987. Uh, and in that auditorium, I think you may have seen Sister Marimba Annie, Dr. Jahan
Yes.
Clark, and others, where he addressed the issue of critical thinking as important as your sense of Afrocentricity or African centeredness. That you don't take things wholesale and you don't get into a panic or into a feel goodism, but
Mm-hmm.
that this foundation is based upon reasoned thought. You see?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And with and over the years, to see Amos working it through as you would see in his works, where he would take you through the textbook in a step-like manner. Good. The ability to take the the standard textbook, right? That is used in the colleges and wherever else. And he now would make it relevant to your struggle. These are the kind of things to me, when I look at the work of an Amos Wilson, right? That's the thing that draws you to him. Methodology.
Mm.
Methodology. So so in the laying out of any of the material, you would see what? An engaging table of contents,
Yes.
right? Many of those speeches were speeches. We didn't have subheadings, hmm? But when we went over the material, hmm, we decided that, listen, this must move from itself being a lecture to the point where it now becomes a text.
Yes. Yes.
And in moving it to a text now, it was supposed to that a person not knowing anything of the subject can fall in so that the editorship will be smooth, the ideas refined, simplified, and then we are taking you now from the baby stage all the way through into into some serious development.
And I feel that way when I read the book, The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. Like you said, it felt like you started in steps and you moved us into, heavier topics. I get that sense of feeling when I read his book, The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. But please continue, Baba.
Yes. In fact, after after in 1980, hearing Amos deliver a piece on the developmental psychology of the Black child, I got hold of the book, and I remarked to Amos that the book just took you from level to level upwards,
Yes.
right? And when you think that you really had it, he went another level, and that was
Yes.
the brilliance of the writing, right? That and I think that is where he used his academic skill along with his intentionality, hmm, to bring us to that point where he would, in a sense, he would break you and then put you back together. Right? In
Mm-hmm.
developmental, you see that at work. You also see it in Blueprint for Black Power, right? It was not just to identify a problem. No, he went into dealing with the structural roots of the problem,
Yes.
right? Laying out the current data, hmm, and also the historical data. And then in the second half of the book now, giving you some remedial work. How
Yes.
can you, given the fact that as a people at the time, we were pulling down something in the region of $500 billion, right? I think it's up to maybe 1.5 trillion now. How if by changing behavior, not even drastically, but by about 5%, what how how can we tailor those resources to 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 uh, to impact a change, a revolutionary change within the community, by just minor changes. And one of the things that you would observe with making minor changes is that you build from small increments. You build in small increments, right? Consciousness is built that way. Reliability, the ability to deal with frustration, the ability to persevere, the ability to deny or to delay gratification, right? Not to lose it, not to show things like displaced aggression, where you aggress against someone as opposed to the real enemy. You see what I mean? And
I see what you mean.
yes, and Amos would also teach you, listen, when to throw your punch. That's the idea. You just don't throw your punch wild. Right? You don't let people egg you into silliness where you get yourself entangled with the system. But you take a deep breath, you step back, and you say, listen, is there a better way around this? Maybe I can go over, under, to the side, or maybe it would require that I confront it directly. But at least he gave you choices and options. Good? And you always kept and you always kept it in your head that some of these things are under your control. And don't let anybody make you just lose your cool. And as a result, um, uh, destroy yourself.
Baba, I'm sorry, Baba. But my next question is this, and it was based on Dr. Amos Wilson's book, The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, and a lot of, and also his book, Awakening the Genius of the Black Children. Can you share with us Dr. Amos Wilson's ideas about child development and how we would benefit from implementing those ideas?
Um, well, of course, as you would know, this is really part of a much larger text. We had really planned to do a second volume of developmental psychology of the Black child, and we had this text dealing with educating the Black child for the 21st century that we
Yes,
were
I heard.
working on. And we took some of the chapters and put into Awakening the Natural Genius. So whereas in the developmental psychology, he was dealing with the prenatal period up to the first 2 to 5 years, in Awakening the Natural Genius now, he's taking that child onwards from that point forward. And in it, we see now how this mind is being molded. Good. That these that the preliminary statements in the developmental psychology dealing with the developmental ratios of the Black child that you would see on those pages. I think what Amos was able to do now is advance that discussion by showing with almost any system of learning, whether you used the Brakeman method, the this method, the that method, Montessori, or whatever system you had. He went further by examining an African-centered system of education that was being done at the Marcus Garvey School. And what he showed in that piece was that, listen, this black child could learn under any system.
That's right.
Good. And that these children at the Marcus Garvey School were outperforming students 2 and 3 grades their senior. Hmm?
Mm.
Yes. You see, so, and sometimes I would ask Amos, well, where did he get the information? He said, it's right there in the literature. Hmm? He said, but if you approach it with intentionality, you will find the material. He said, and for the most part, why people don't get this stuff is because they didn't go in there to find anything. Hmm? Mm-hmm. Yes, it's yes, and Amos, and as you would know in the developmental psychology, um, the choice children that were used were not black middle class children or upper class children. They took children across the board. Hmm?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as you would know, that in psychology, the measure is usually whom? The the white middle class child as the child of record. And Amos, in his work, brought that black child back to us, hmm,
Mm.
by examining this child and putting us on the map in terms of developmental psychology. Right? He dared to advance that, yes, there is a developmental psychology of black children different from any other child.
That's
Hmm?
right. That's
Good.
right.
And in establishing that platform, we move forward. Hmm? So this way, it was no longer required to see your child as a deficit child. Hmm? No, this child has all the brilliance. Hmm? And the key thing is to have brilliant parents. What can brilliant parents do with this child with such an outstanding head start? Hmm? That is where the challenge was. And now it called upon us as parents now to, in a sense, bring this child up to speed.
Right.
Good. And of course, we are attempting this in a political world, a geopolitical world,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is quite oppressive and antithetical to where we want this child to go and where we want to be. So it's always a constant push, and it's not um, just an onward progression, but in it you find regression, progression, regression, a push and a pull, always a push and a pull, and that's how this system is set up. And if you're not equipped to deal with this type of thing, it's going to break you.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
And so our babies, so it's important that we, I know that, and I know you mentioned Dr. Ben, I'm getting ready to bring up Dr. Francis Cress Welsing.
Of
Dr.
course,
Francis Cress Welsing said that we need to develop our babies, at all costs. Given that our babies are, she said children are the future of any people, and that we must, sacrifice and do whatever it takes, so that our children will be, I think she said, meet their optimum development or something like that, or obtain their optimum development. So thank you so much for that. But I'm glad that you mentioned the falsification of African consciousness, because my next question is based on that text, the falsification of African consciousness. How important is the destructing, reconstructing, and teaching of African history to inculcate African people with an African worldview and African agency?
oh, I mean, I mean, that's the fundamental thing there. It's interesting how the text came about. In the first place, is that I was at a lecture listening to Amos, and it was at Harlem Hospital, and he did this speech on European political dogmatism. And when I left that that night from Harlem Hospital, we were almost shaking. That's the second lecture in the book. Hmm? Afri- uh, and a few of us, Brother Ivor and some others, Brother um, Adisa Makalani, and so forth, you know, we had started transcribing these lectures by hand.
Mm.
Hmm. Yes, in those days we didn't have access to dictaphones to any degree,
Right.
right? Right. The younger generation might even know what a dictaphone is, but it was basically a cassette recorder with a pedal, right? With a foot pedal, and you would advance the tape and type it into the or write out the lecture at that time
Hmm.
until we were able to, with the development of word perfect software or word processing software, then we keyed it in. So one day I went to Amos after getting my mind blown by those lectures, and I said to Amos, "This is good enough material for a book." Right? So this was what 1988, 89. And he was working on black violence at the time. And he said to me, he said, if you help me finish this one, Black on Black, I think we can get to the the book that became Falsification of African Consciousness. Now, Amos in there dealt with a concept called uh, um, amnesia, right?
Yes,
What happens
historical
to,
amnesia.
what happens to a people? Hmm?
Yes.
And to me, in terms of that core thing that you have to develop within yourself, hmm, he used that example of Aronson, hmm, of taking the past from the person
Yes.
and endowing them with a present, or taking the present and leaving no past, and you see the different reactions within the personality, right? Now, just as we are seeing today with the current political system and the situation that's going on, right? We see what? Historical amnesia. Hmm?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Teach.
Yes, in there, every time, what's being shown up? Reconstruction history. Hmm? What happened in Reconstruction, right? Rutherford B. Hayes and Tilden Compromise, and what it did to Black people. So just as we celebrate that brother from Georgia who
Right.
just won his seat to the Senate, this was the first time in 144 years a Black person from the South, good, from since 1877. This now is 2021. It's now that another Black person from the South is going back to the United States Senate. Hmm?
Mm.
That's what we talk about regression and progression in history.
Mhm,
And what
mhm.
happens if a people suffer from historical amnesia? Why does it take in the South, where in many of those areas we are the majority,
That's right.
right? That we cannot win a statewide race hmm, to get
Mm.
to get someone into the U.S. Senate to deal with and represent the business of our people. Hmm? And
Mm.
how that was systematically organized and orchestrated with Jim Crow laws and all these other things that we have seen, poll taxes and literacy tests and everything else, right? And
Right.
racist lynchings and whatever mm, mm, that has kept us out of power. mm, And what this loss of power actually means. mm, mm, that now, so some people might see, oh, well, we are making progress. And it's like, oh no, this ain't progress. Hmm? Hmm? We were there how many years ago? In the 18, right? From 1865 to 1877. And what happened? Hmm? What happened? And the same mob violence that we saw there on the 6th of
Teach, Baba.
January, it's the same things that happened repeatedly to us throughout the history of this nation. Hmm? Mhm. Mhm. Like somebody will come to ask you when you come to vote, how many bubbles in a bar of soap? Hmm? This is the kind of stuff. These people didn't get ahead through righteous means and through brilliance.
Teach.
Right? This was through the subjugation of other people. Hmm? Hmm? Good. That head start and this so-called privilege that they speak to. I know. No, that's not what it is. It's the suppression, the oppression, and sometimes the extinction of other people. Why you see them in these positions of power? Hmm? Hmm? There has never been a level playing field in this country.
Never.
Never.
Yeah.
And this is what we see going in there. So when you read that first piece in a European historiography, which would be the first lecture that he did over in New Jersey, you would see Amos now taking that Reconstruction history and weaving within it some statements by Lerone Bennett, when Lerone Bennett was making the point that because of the kind of oppression that was done to our people in Reconstruction, between the years post-Reconstruction, 1877, right, 1865 to 1877, it took us to get the Civil Rights Act and these other things back in 1965, almost 100 years. These people sat on our necks and knelt on our necks. Good. And then they expect us to be congratulatory that, oh, we have made progress. And this is what the uphill task that we face year in and year out, year in and year out. And consciousness and knowledge of these experiences is what shapes your behavior.
That's right.
Right? It allows you to carry yourself, comport yourself, address yourself, and address the world in your terms. Yes, and don't fall captive to all kinds of fads and silliness, but that you're able to shred or to shed this type of baggage and keep your eyes focused on where you want to go. So you don't get distracted into simplicities, drugs, this, that, and all these other things that we get caught up in. Because, hey, you have your mission, you have your purpose, and yes, you will have some enjoyment, but after that, you get back onto your task.
So, Baba, I'm glad that you brought up, politics. So, would Dr. Amos Wilson consider Biden a victory for Black people and him electing these different people in his cabinet? They're like, oh, we have a Black Secretary of State, we have a Black this, a Black that. Would he have called this a victory for Black people?
No, that's just stage one. I mean, that's just stage one because we have been that. I mean, read the Reconstruction history. Right?
Come on, that's right. Talk about it.
Good. We even had, a proposed vice presidential candidate and all of that stuff, right? Good. But again, that compromise with Tilden Hayes compromise, right? Where they moved the federal troops from the South and allowed those Southern whites total control of Black folk and pushed us into situations akin to and in many cases worse than slavery itself. Good. And that period went on for well over 100 to 150 years. Right? So when you measure this time to that time, you really see that it's like one guy has been holding your foot and he's been running all this time, and now he lets you out. Or as the Malcolm analogy was, where if somebody put a knife in your back 6 inches and pull it out 3, and you thinking that is progress, it's basically what has happened here. Right?
Absolutely.
Good. This is just phase one. This is just phase one. That needs to be an accelerated program. I think that I was hoping that he would put in a conscious brother who would be the Attorney General, hmm, so that we can deal with some of these issues that has troubled us for such a long time. All of these suppression laws about suppressing the black vote and all the different things that are being done to the vote. Because actually, because of the early voting that helped to elect that brother there, right? Knock, brother, whatever knock it is, it escapes me for the minute. That legislature is looking to what? Stop early voting.
Mm.
Now, here it is, one of the first times in how many years we have won a statewide race. And the method that was used, what? Early voting and and the type of organizing with Sister Abrams and all these other people south there. The next thing they're trying to do is no, as opposed to maybe 2 weeks of early voting, no, we only make it 3 days. All kinds of stuff. These people do not play fair. And yes, we should bask in small victories, but do not lose sight that
That's right.
we have won the war.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you with you more. Baba, now I want to move into Blueprint for Black Power. And you know that I read this book. I know I bugged you when my book club read this book about 2 or 3 years ago. And we read every page of this book. But so my next question is from based on this. So can you describe some of the ideas Dr. Amos Wilson proposed that he believed would solve our social, economical, and political problems? I mean, it was a lot that he said in this book. This book is like 868 pages, but and he had a lot of ideas. And so, could you talk about some of those ideas that he had that would solve some of our, social, economical, and political problems?
Well, the first thing that I must say in honor of Dr. Wilson and Blueprint is that he never saw it completed.
Mm.
Right? This week, 1995, just around the 8th of January, is when he took in with a stroke,
Mm.
and he he passed on the 14th. So it's usually, uh, a solemn day for many of us. And the fact that he never saw it in its finished form,
Mm.
it's almost like he finished the last edit that Friday afternoon, and it was, goodbye. Hey, so on that note, that book has a certain type of it touches me in a specific way
Mhm.
that we had to now take this task on, and with the help of quite a few friends, graphic artists, Joseph Gillians, Adisa Makalani, Ivor Allen, and Andre Gray, and so many others, right? We took this and brought this book into being
Mhm.
at tremendous cost, both financially and of course emotionally,
Yes.
right? So but anyway, we were in the Bronx at the time, and we basically had to close the office in order to garner the resources required to bring this into being. Now, in the text itself, you would see that we created almost about maybe 60 charts or so, right? With different formulations and master plan as to how we could approach some type of economic solvency. So what Amos looked at is fundamentally this. With the fact that we brought in that type of income, he was saying that only 5% of that income actually remains within Black hands. Most of those monies are paid out to other people and other people's interests. So he saw it as basically a deficit spending, right? That we, as an economy, though we might have been the eighth or the ninth largest in the world at the time, good, this money was flowing out of the community, and little being held to make some type of advance to ameliorate our situation. And after analyzing the problem in the second half, you saw where he now reconstructed an economic or constructed an economic approach to revitalize these communities and to come with some type of investment opportunities and packages. At the time, as much as we actually earned as take-home pay that 500 billion, and of course, many of that went out into rents and all the different types of things. The I just lost my train of thought there. Yes, but yeah, but as much as that amount of money was being spent by our people, what Amos said is that if we could just even maintain 2% more of that income and put it towards a larger saving fund. Or the point I was going to get to is that black manufacture at the time only accounted for about $20 billion. So what we're seeing is that with the potential that existed in the Black community, right? Our manufacturing sector was only producing in the region of $20 billion of goods. You see what I mean? So what he was saying then is that, hey, the fact that we were consuming almost in the region of 495 billion, our manufacturing sector only producing 20 plus billion dollars of goods. Right? It showed that there was room for tremendous growth in manufacturing other things. And core to that would be the educating of our people in not just a servant mentality, but a productive mentality, right? A mentality that would take risk, right? A cutting edge mentality. You see what I mean? An innovative mentality, right? Because how else are you going to take care of your people? How else are you going to secure and advance the interests of your people? You see, and you felt that you cannot consume your way, as you played in the piece. You cannot consume yourself into equality.
That's
but
right.
You have to produce yourself and outproduce other people.
Hold on, Bob. I gotta drop a bomb. I gotta hold on. You can't consume yourself out of. What did you say? You gotta say that one more time, Bobby. You can't consume yourself out of inequality. Say it one more time for me, Baba.
No, sometimes the African Holy Ghost takes over. So sometimes I can't recall it.
Oh my gosh. So I gotta get it back. I'm sitting here like, golly, Baba, just say it again. You can't consume your way out of, you said that was the African Holy Ghost. You can't consume your way out of inequality. You said you have to outproduce other people. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
And one of the things that I cited as you and the conversation that we had earlier, when you get into the bowels of the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat, and even you would see it also in falsification of African consciousness and African-centered consciousness, right? We have to take on serious tasks. The idea that our children can come out of school after 10, 15 years of learning and not be functioning, even the basic skills.
Teach.
Yes, that can't work. That can't work. It's a world based in literacy, right? And if you come out here and you can't read at this stage, be look at the deficit that you're up against. Hmm? Hmm? And many a times, folks come through here, and and they have good drive. There's great motivation. However, what you see has happened is that in the formative years, those developmental years, and those middle years in school, sometimes when they stop teaching math and they don't teach geography and literature and all these other things, and the industrial sciences and these other skills, right? You can now grow. You could now grow into adulthood, and you could be motivated in these areas, but you don't have the fundamentals to take you there. You see, right? And given that you don't have the fundamentals, it's almost like you're trying to scale a 30-foot wall. Good, and you keep jumping to get your hand to the top that you can, you know, that you can overcome it. Good. But as you get older, you get weaker.
Yeah.
Good. Good. And then you end up only just barking at the wall. Hmm? Right? Because this society is based on certain time dimensions. Hmm? You see, they give you a certain early years to get certain things under the cap, under the belt. Hmm? And if you miss those years, you pay a terrible price. You see? And remember, it's a race-based society too. Hmm? So of course, your schools or our schools are not going to be getting the best of any and everything. See? So, so if you miss these years, hmm, when these foundations and these platforms are supposed to be in place, then you have to do serious catch up. And one of the things that I see is many of us now are getting into the consciousness well into our 30s, into our 40s, and maybe now getting into our 50s. Hmm? By then, we are saddled with other responsibilities where we cannot
Yeah.
take certain types of risk. Hmm? And that platform should have been set, within the first 10, 15 years of life. And these are some of the things that we are facing. So you see our children coming out with limited language, poor writing skills, and other things, right? And of course, not all, of course,
Oh no,
some,
absolutely, absolutely.
right? But a significant amount. And of course, it sets up limited opportunities, and a system like this, what I mean? And a prison industrial complex and other things, right? And one thing you learn about these other people, they have no need for obsolete people, right? They get rid of obsolete people.
Right, they do.
Yeah, they do. You know what I mean? Fortunately or unfortunately, in our case, they lock some in jail and they pull us out of real competition. Amos had made a point to me earlier. He said, the idea of messing up in school at around 15, 16, 17. He said, that's no accident. What happens in that case is that at that time, the weeding out process has already started taking place. And if your children are now looking to play at those times, the opportunities now to get into the elite schools and the gifted programs and the grants, the Pell grants and the DIS grant and the other monies that are available, the scholarships, etc. You're locked out of that because what? It's being graded, and it's not that the children are not brilliant enough, but this is how the thing is set up. Right? My friend, Brother Makalani, he was living up in the Boston area, up in the Massachusetts area, and he told me that he was enrolling one of his children into one of those colleges, and he said when he drove out to that campus, hmm, he sat down and he checked how many floors that library was, and it was the library in honor of Dubois, and I think it was maybe 25 stories. Hmm? That was the library. Hmm? I mean, do we see that here at City College or any one of these schools here? Hmm? How? I mean, for a complex to be 25 stories, you see these campuses out there,
Oh
hmm?
yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Right? And you know that in many cases, the monies that we are paying out in taxes and other things here are being used to finance these areas of the country. Hmm? And we're getting trinkets for it. You see? So it requires that we approach even education and other things there with a serious political understanding. Hmm?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things I try to tell people, I say, blueprint is not difficult to go through. It's just it is quite long. So it's going to take you, a dictionary or two, some note taking, and some patience. But hey, the only thing you got here is time. So you may as well sit down and get a proper understanding of the work and use some of the other books like African Centered Consciousness and Issues of Manhood in Black and White and these other works as building blocks before sometimes you get to the heavier work.
Absolutely.
You see?
Absolutely. Baba, let me ask you a question. In Blueprint for Black Power, there was a lot of data
Mm-hmm.
that you all presented. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think that that data has changed much, or do you think a lot of it is still, it still remains the same? What
Well,
do
of
you think?
course. Well, of course. A lot of the numbers would have changed because, as you would see, even up to when Amos passed, we were using 1993 and 1994 numbers. And with his passing and the book taking 3 years further to complete,
Mhm.
I went and I got the 1996 numbers, etc., in order to update those charts that we had first laid out. So you would
Absolutely.
see in the in the area dealing with the top Black 100s in terms of corporations in this country and other things, right? Black Enterprise 100 and these other things. You would see 2 different years. Hmm?
I saw it. Mhm.
Right. So that's where, as the editor, I had to go in and get the next issue of these magazines, etc., and somehow create another column, good, and show that that yes, what was here last year wasn't the same for the following year. But these are some of the challenges. But the fundamentals are still there. Hmm?
Absolutely. That's what I was getting ready to say. So
Right.
even though the data's changed, like you said, a lot of the fundamentals are still there. I think that Dr. Amos Wilson's premise in this text is that he said a lot of the problems that we have because we don't have power. And he's saying that power, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Baba, but power is tied to wealth. And so you can't have power if you don't have wealth. And so this was about building wealth in order to gain power. And so, I remember in the book, and you wrote it or you edited the first part. He
Hmm.
talked about Black people and victimization, and he said that, and I'm trying to get to it. I want to quote it. I don't want to paraphrase it, but he was basically saying, okay, here it
Hmm.
is, right here. It says the white man oppresses African people because he possesses the power to do so. The Black
Hmm.
man is oppressed because he has not developed the power to prevent his oppression. His
Yes.
oppression will end when the power of his oppressor is counted by his own power. And
Absolutely.
I thought that that was major. And so I feel like, he was in this book, the objective was to teach us how to empower ourselves. I love how you discussed you called them articulated tribes in the book. And you talked about the
Yes.
Koreans, the Japanese, and
Hmm.
how they operate. You
Mm-hmm.
talked about different means of raising money, like susus
Yes.
and tontines and things of that
Yes.
nature.
Absolutely.
You also talked about economics and how our social problems are tied to our economic problems, and how
Mm-hmm.
our political problems are tied to our economic problems. And so you talked about, empowering ourselves economically, and then towards the end you talked about the crisis of Black leadership.
Leadership. Yes.
Yeah. So do you still believe that we're still in the crisis, Baba
Absolutely.
Sababu?
Absolutely. And of course, many of us thought that with the coming of Obama, that it was going to be some kumbaya moment, and right away the those those white guys in the Senate, they said that we're going to make this a failed presidency. That their thing was that we are going to starve that Obama administration, and it's kind of funny that we come in to save the day, and everybody else gets tax cuts right
Yep.
after we are out of office. You see what I mean? So here it is in the 2006, 7, and 8 crash. hmm, Obama comes in, stabilizes the situation. And after 8 years, what happens? Trump comes in hmm, and he gives
Mhm.
billions upon billions in tax cuts, hmm, drains the treasury, and look at where we are now. So now, after 4 years of him, we see now Biden coming back in there, right? And look at the hand that he's dealt. So this is what goes on. hmm. So having an astute understanding of the politics, because I think in chapter 1, the typology of power, I
Yes.
think, yes, I think that sets it up. I have so many of my friends who have read the first chapter about 10 times. They went over and over and over and over it because
Yes.
that is the theory of the book laid out there. Hmm? Understanding, coercive power, propagandous power, all these different types of power. hmm? And also the power to make other people sing and dance to your tune. And that's what we see happening here. See, so now in Blueprint, Amos was actually taking different sections because listen, one day he said to me that the book was really written in his head
Mm.
before he finally put it on paper. Right? He was able to see his build up from the 1980s, 1980 in particular, all the way up. So by the time it came to doing Blueprint, in a sense, the book was just flowing from the head. And of course,
Mm.
along with um, good advice from Brother Joseph Gillians and others, right? Yeah, you could see Amos tightening and bringing the thought out because there's no way you can write that amount. Amos was basically writing about 300 pages a year in Blueprint for Black Power. Right? 300 pages a year. Mm. That's,
Mm.
I mean, that's prolific. That's
Yeah, it
what.
is.
Good. Sometimes, Amos would come and he would come with about 4 leaves on the weekend, right? Right? 4 leaves that he had written over the weekend, right?
Mm.
Yes, these legal pads. And, and what happened is that he wrote it in longhand, which shortened the process so that he didn't have to go and type it in and all this kind of stuff there. We got folk to type it in and I would sit and pull the data together and design these charts and everything else. But the book was in his head. Hmm?
Before
And
he
yes,
started.
yes, because you can see the buildup. He had
Absolutely.
he had done developmental, right? We had done falsification. We had
Yes.
done awakening, right? We had done the series on that became the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat. right? We had done the lectures for the Garvey book were already done too. So what happened there is that Blueprint now became that point of zenith. Hmm?
Right.
Right. And by then it was all coming together. So that's where you saw that confluence taking place.
So Baba, let me ask you this. You said that he didn't see the book through.
No,
And what chapter did it end for Dr. Amos Wilson, would you say?
um, sadly, he had done a trip to Mississippi, his home state, and he had visited there over the Kwanzaa period. And he had done a couple talks, I think might have been in Louisiana for maybe Brother Kweku. So he came back to the office about maybe the 2nd or the 3rd of January. And of course, we picked up. Now he had mentioned at the at a lecture for Brother Attorney Maddox that that it's probably about 800 pages, and he might do it in 4 and 4. But he still continued doing some additional writing. And when he came back from Mississippi, he gave me a piece. I edited the piece. I passed it back to him. He edited again, passed it back to him. So by the time Friday, that Friday, he says, "Sababu, I think, I think we are done now. This is it." And then, so he had just about completed the task, right? And what was required thenceforth was to now take some of these pieces that we had not put in place and find the appropriate place in which to lay them and get that continuity and flow. And of course, then produce the type of introduction and back cover and the acknowledgments and these other things, just to give the book that oomph, that extra quality of love and taste. And the fact that Amos died in the process, it required that we up the ante, because this was going to be, this is going to be his finest work. So we had to do specific stuff, because by the way, I think you would know that it was actually supposed to be a 10 or 12-part series.
Didn't know that.
Yes, that's what it was. And Blueprint was the notes initially for the series. And it started growing and growing and growing. So from 1993, right? No, from 1992, the back end of 1992, in preparing for that for the seminars on power, is what those notes evolved and evolved and evolved. We had planned to do actually something like what we're doing today in the office. We didn't have the technology yet, but the vision was there, which was to get a group of about maybe 20 or 30, not the large crowd, and we were going to really do a bang up job on the issues of power. And we were going to videotape that series and have it almost for some type of simulcast. And everyone coming to those classes would have a booklet prepared, maybe about 50, 60 pages prepared, so that for every session, we would have the format laid out for someone to follow. You see, that was the initial plan for that lecture series. And of course, it started taking its own legs, and that's what we have here now, Blueprint.
Absolutely. And we read it. Shout out to the Resurgence of the African Mind Book Club, the RAM book club. We read every page of it, and each Sunday we met for a period of 8 months
Mm.
to discuss the chapter. And family, you can find these chapters on YouTube. Just type in the search bar RAM Book Club, RAM Book Club, Blueprint for Black Power, or I actually created a playlist on my channel. And so you can look for RAM Book Club, Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos Wilson. Click on that, and all of our discussions are there. So, Baba, I know that we're getting ready to wrap up, and I would like to wrap up the conversation with your newest book, The Psychology of Self-Hate and Self-Defeat Towards a Reclamation of the African Mind. Baba, this book should be in every Black person's library. I mean, because I look on social media, I look in the community, and our people, I mean, when you talk about self-hate, I see it every day. And so self-hate and self-defeat is like it's our community it's just very pervasive
Mhm.
in our community. So I think that this work is very, very timely. And so I would like
Mhm.
to get into this book. I know, and shout out to Brother Geechee Ya. His book club is reading The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. They're reading this right now. And I think they're more than halfway through it, because he started
Mhm.
posting about reading it maybe a month ago. And so they're more
Mhm.
than halfway through. But Baba, let's get into the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat. I know you and I talked about it, and you said that this was based on 5 lectures that Dr.
Mhm.
Amos Wilson gave on self-hate. But go ahead, Bob, and expound on this.
Yeah, the year was 1987, and we had done quite a few things together, but we had not published yet. We would later in 1989 publish Black on Black Violence. But in those years, um, I worked in the so called corporate world, and um, Brother Amos decided that he wanted to do a session on the psychology of self hatred. Now, as I outlined in the intro, this is coming before falsification, before Black on Black, and these other pieces. But what Amos had done in 1987 is an examination, a serious examination. And I found that those pieces were so profound in terms of a core understanding as to who we are, right? That it was like it was the missing book in, yes, in the suite of books, because some of these others are coming in 1988, 1987, and other years. But the self-hatred series, where you get Amos on a Friday evening for just about 20 plus hours, mm, where now he had the opportunity to expound on an issue week after week after week, get the necessary feedback from the group, and further these thoughts. Uh, that what I did back then is I started transcribing those pieces along with Brother Adisa Makalani. And we kept doing little piece by little piece. But of course, we went off to do Black on Black and the other books. And this piece languished there for quite a long time. Even Sister Utrice Deed, who you might know, she was at one point involved in the project. And and we thought that we would have been ready around maybe around the year 2000. But certain things happened and it got postponed. So finally, I did a death roll or a life roll and say, listen, we got to get self-hatred out, and there we have it. So it is, I think, as my graphic artist calls it, he calls it a nutcracker.
Mm,
Yes, and you see that the issues that we are wrestling with today are not just new issues.
no, not at all.
These are old issues. Those fundamentals of religion, Amos dealt with the, you know, with the origin of the Hermetic myth, the Hermetic mythology, the curse of Ham, and all of this type of stuff. Then, so every week he would come in and deal with something, and that was more profound. Of course, with 20 hours of Amos, you just cannot put it just like that as a transcript. So then it required that we just go over the material week in and week out, and develop an efficient table of contents that allow the book to be managed well. And in managing and choosing nice topic areas, and sometimes moving a thing or two along and giving an idea through the question and answer period as to where our people were, what were the issues of the time. A person they would get an idea of capturing those years in the development of our consciousness in the Harlem community, those years, let's say between 1975 and 1987, those formative years that shaped so many of us, all of us who were going to Egypt, those of us who were going to see the Africoid heads in Mexico, and those of us who were taking trips to Ghana and other places. And I wanted to make note that the 80s was a period of intense intellectual development.
Yes.
And I tried to capture it in the issues that governed us in the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat, and give an idea as to who came before us, so that the young reader could now go and Google these names and see that the path laid out by these folks, the C.L.R. Jameses and the Samori Marksman and the Lombe Brath and all of these other folks who had forums all over the place, and we would be going to these places and putting in the work. Because that's one of the things with the psychology of self-hatred, is that you have to do the work. Right, and two, one of the things that we got tired of too is people putting out crappy looking books. Right? Yes. Black must stand for excellence.
Right.
Good. And I think we have enough material and tools at hand that we can put together works of scholarship that would stand for the image and the respect and brilliance of our people. So within yes, so self-hatred, in a sense, it was again building on the blocks coming before. So, the lessons from Blueprint and from African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, and from the other book, Distorted Truth. And these are the books that we had worked on. No, we took those efforts and put them to produce the psychology of self-hatred. Not self-hate, but self-hatred and self-hatred.
Yes. I kept saying self-hate, it's self-hatred. Baba, let me ask you this. I wonder how many people, when they looked at this cover, caught that this is a brown paper bag. Going back to the brown paper bag test. I was wondering how many people actually caught it, because when I looked at it, oh man, you and I were talking about the cover, and you said, well, what did you notice? You don't remember? We were talking about it.
Yes.
He's like, that brown. I was like, oh yeah, look at the brown paper. I wonder how many people actually caught that you put the brown paper bag up there. What made you go with this image?
Well, of course, it's kudos to the graphic artist. He had submitted some sketches, and we looked at them, and like it didn't hit right. And then he said, "Oh, I think I have something." And then boom, he sent this one through with the brown paper bag, and I say, you know what? That image is going to tell 1,000 words.
Yes.
This is actually where we were. straddling that fence of the self-hatred, right? The brown paper bag test, and
Yes.
right, and for those, and listen, and the brown paper bag test didn't exist only in the schools; it existed in churches and other places.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, you just didn't walk in black and sit down in the front seat. You know, and some of these issues I would hear my father would tell me of these issues about people paying for their seat in the church back in the Caribbean.
Mm.
Yes, certain groups would have donated a pew, and therefore, if you went to church, you just didn't go and sit in that particular pew, right? So sometimes when that family did not come to church in those years, those pews would be vacant.
Mm.
Yes, and you didn't even dare go up there. Mm. So what you see happening there is that we use now that contradiction, of the schism that were created institutionally, right, by many of us manifesting the the caste system,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right, and the class system that was prevalent at the time. We said that this is going to be a good line of demarcation to set, right, to show this contradiction there. So that was the actual design of the cover.
I love it. I think it was brilliant. And still in, like you said, a lot of these issues that we're dealing with today, they're not new issues. But I'm thinking about colorism right now, Baba, texturism. You hear people
Oh
talk
yeah.
about Becky with the beautiful hair. I mean, we hear
Oh yeah.
all of this self-hatred stuff. People like, no, I wanna, I mean, looking at all this interracial. I mean, Baba, I could go on and on
Yes, yes, yes.
about the amount of self-hatred that I witness,
You know,
online and offline. So I think that this work that you produced is very, very timely. And I recommend, family, that you get this book if you don't already have it, Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. Baba, do you want them to go to the website to get it from you, or should they contact you through African World Info Systems to get the book? Okay, or is it available on your website or?
yes, yes,
Okay,
yes, yes. It's available on africanworldinfosystems.co,
okay, okay.
right? And so that's one way. But I'll tell you one of the things though that I really appreciate, and the website takes a little from it, which is that the idea of folks calling through has become over the years a window to interact with
Okay.
the readers of the book, and I really appreciate it, getting a chance to talk to what motivated some folks and the different levels of development that they have gone through and what these books have meant to them. So yes, they can order through the site, but also the personal interaction is also what makes the book.
Yes.
And in dealing with even self-hatred, I would often get calls, just to check up on me to see how I'm doing. And what's the progress, and maybe I might float somebody a piece just to give me a check. How is this sounding? And they would give me some points of refinement and other things. So that type of interaction works extremely well, along with, of course, they can purchase otherwise um, on the site, but they can feel free to put a call through and you know and uh, and give me a word of wisdom, because
Excellent.
yes, because to me that is what makes me and makes the work fulfilling.
Okay. All
Mm,
right, beautiful. So, Baba, I want to close by asking you this one last question, and that is,
mhm.
what's the best way for us to honor Dr. Amos Wilson? What can we do, in our homes, in our communities, to honor him and to continue his legacy? What is the best ways?
well well, of course it would be to, and one, of course, to internalize the material.
Mhm.
The Amos mightn't have been the person for a great degree of veneration, right? And that style of veneration. But um, he possessed tremendous intellect, good, and warmth. And just walking with Amos or or talking with him in the office, and Amos opening himself up to rank and file to just sit around the table, and discuss. And I think I noted in the intro that Amos would take certain ideas and he would not poo poo your ideas, but in a sense, he would add another layer of light to the idea.
Mm.
And, and you would walk out with a sense of fulfillment and richness and wanting to do more. So I think the spirit of Amos Wilson, right, that gregariousness, and Amos loved a good joke, right? He loved a good joke. He loved to watch a little comedy and this and that and the other. But I think one thing Amos had was a certain type of discipline. And that discipline was 5 days a week would be the work. Um, Friday into Saturday would be periods of leisure. Sunday will be a period of rest and recuperation. And Monday, back to the grindstone, back to the grindstone of producing. So I think that you can take from Amos there is that, the overindulgence in self gratification wasn't his thing. I mean, I remember Amos had a small bottle of Southern Comfort, right? A little, just about this much. And somebody brought it to him one time, Christmas or Kwanzaa or whatever. And I see Amos with his little coffee, and he would put a drop, one drop. I say, Amos, man, this is good stuff. This thing tastes nice. This Southern Comfort. And I say, my goodness me. He said, nope, man, just one drop. That's it. Pop, one drop in the cup. Good. And the thing would stay on the desk for maybe 2 years. And he would just take a drop and that's it. Never overindulging in that type of stuff. Mm-mm. Like he kept his brain cells to do the work. And of course, Amos wasn't a spendthrift person where you would go in and Amos had 10 and 15 pairs of suits and all this type of stuff. Nope, no. He put his time and investment in his mind. And we are fortunate that we see the product and to just be there just to help, right? Just to be a helper, right? And bringing a certain skill set to the table. I mean, it was enough for me. And the shock of him passing and having now to take the reins and to bring Blueprint and the other works, it was just one of those moments in my life that I would never forget.
Mm.
The, and in a sense, Amos made men of us, right? Where you had to literally put your shoulder to the wheel. So some people come and they carry you for a whole lifetime. Amos came, and I was in my maybe late 30s when Amos passed on. So now, hey, you had to shoulder the wheel, and whatever you had learned from all the different trips to different places, etc. Now you had to produce.
That's right.
You see, and and I would hope that these books would move you into these childhood, into adolescent, into your adult or middle years and adult years, and it makes you produce the necessary work to bring change for your people.
Hold on, Bob. I gotta drop a ball for you.
You're too kind.
Thank you so much, Baba Sababu, for coming on the platform tonight again. Baba, it's just an honor to sit and look at you, to talk with you. I mean, it was just I mean, it was just an honor. I learned so much from you tonight, and just listening to your interactions with Dr. Amos Wilson. It helped me get a feel for his personality because I mean, I listened to his lectures. I've read his books,
Mm.
but just you're giving us some insight, as to like who he was as a person, and so getting a feel for him, and so Baba, I definitely, and I know you and I talked about doing this in the past, and I know we're in the middle of COVID now, but
Mhm.
remember you and I talked about
Absolutely.
a pilgrimage to where
Mhm.
he is buried and have a
Yeah.
ceremony there. And so maybe
Mm.
we can, arrange something. I don't know, not for 2021, but maybe for 2022 or 2023, we organize,
Yes.
a trip where we, on the day that he transitioned, we come there, we pour libations,
Absolutely.
and really just celebrate Dr. Amos Wilson. I want to thank everybody under the sound of my voice for tuning in tonight. You all hung. Usually my show, Bob, is like an hour. We've been going strong for 90 minutes. And
Whoa.
the people have been here. They've been here. They've been listening. A couple of people fell off, but the majority of the people stayed. And I just appreciate you all tuning in to the discussion. Family, please share the show. Okay. Baba dropped a lot of jewels tonight, a lot of powerful information. So if you haven't already shared the show, and shout out to Stay Balanced, who said I shared it in 5 Facebook groups. But if you haven't already shared the show, please take a moment out, share this show on all of your social media platforms. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, be sure to head on over to YouTube, because I'm gonna stop streaming on Facebook. Most of my views come from YouTube, Baba. So I know people can use all the tools, but I think I might focus on growing my YouTube channel. So if you're on Facebook, please head on over to YouTube, type in Dr. Maat, subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so that as soon as I go live, you will be notified. Baba, do you have any closing words, Baba, before we head on out?
Well, first I want to give a word of thanks. And first, I want to thank Dr. Wilson, our ancestor, and that he's looking over us, and his watchful hand is guiding us to
Mm,
produce even more, and
mm,
and we hope that with the let's see with Godspeed, Olidumari or Ingai or whoever be blessed, that we can produce the next generation of books dealing with Amos's works that are still sitting in the file cabinet back of me.
yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah. So I hope that we can, with the strength and time, and that we can protect ourselves in this time of COVID and other things, that we can bring to you another serving of Amos.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And Baba, they really look, they in the chat room. I don't know if you can see. I've been trying to post the comments so you can see them, but people are saying that they appreciate you coming on the platform. He said, brother Samuel said, I just finished reading Blueprint a couple of weeks ago. He said, one of my life's greatest accomplishments. He said, can't thank you enough. He said, can't thank you enough. Another brother, Willie Stanley, he said, our dear brother was our gifted blessing to African people and our liberation soldier. He is appreciated and missed. I missed his unique voice, his unique perspective, in his loving wit. Brother Ali said, this was a great discussion. He said, this elder, speaking of you, he said, is a treasure. Uh, Phyllis McLeod, Sister Phyllis McLeod said, Brother Sababu, you are doing extremely well. Thank you. So it's a lot of chats, a lot of stuff, a lot of comments in the chat, and I'm trying to show them to you if
Yes,
you can see them. Brother Geechee Yah said, yes, Baba, we love you. Thank you for your work. As my mother always said, give people their flowers while they can smell them. So that's why I'm showing you these comments, Baba.
yes,
This is, yes, as someone said you're wearing Quado said Baba Sababu is wearing an authentic cloth poncho directly from the motherland. Compliments of my ebonyexpressions.com. Ashe.
yes,
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
yes.
Uh,
Thank you.
all
Yes,
right.
my dear. All
Yeah.
right.
All right, so Baba, thank you so much for coming on. Let me get this comment off. I don't know what I. Someone said, "Great stream, thank you so much." Oh, and Ra'am Netta said, "Why doesn't Sababu do lectures to expound on Amos's ideas?" So, Baba, they want to know why don't you do lectures, Baba?
Listen, I tell you, the books take a lot out of me. And I'm not only doing his, I think I just finished a work for an elder who who at 82 was doing his work, and just as he completed his work, he transitioned. So that was this work you see here, um, by Brother Ponder. So usually I'm here working and producing most of the time. So I put in an appearance every now and again. I'm not one of the lettered ones.
Okay.
However, I like when we do appear, we have something substantial to offer our reading community.
Okay. All
Mm.
right. So I got you. You're saying, look, these books and writing and editing, you're saying that a lot of that it takes a lot out of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So
I can say that I'm almost sure you can see some of my tired eyes because sometimes I go in at 5 in the morning and get up by 9, and then you're back on it again. And sometimes you're fighting for a thought, you're fighting for a word, you're fighting for a phraseology, or you're trying to understand these times. In fact, I started off doing an updated forward for awakening the natural genius of Black children. and and so far it has gone up to maybe about 16 to 20 pages. And
mm.
you know what I mean? So it's a piece into it unto itself. Now the initial book, we had a forward of maybe just about 2 or 3 pages, but then after the book had been out here for about what 30 years, just about, you know um, it was um, it was required that it be introduced to a new audience, a new generation of adults and children. So so I wrote a piece in there as as a new forward, and now we are going to reprint again, and in view of this period here, which I call the AC and the BC period, which is before COVID and after COVID, and what this portends for the education of our children and the social engineering that is going to come out of this relationship here. You know, uh, I've been trying to see if I can button it up so that in reintroducing Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, some of these perspectives can be in there. Of course, I'm not touching the overall text of the book as laid out by Amos, but giving some perspective on the times and this period that will be facing us in the development of our children. I think it was really essential. And sometimes it takes you in an unfolding situation like this. Sometimes a little piece of 20, 30 pages might take you a year because everything is just changing. It's ubiquitous, it's fleeting.
Right.
So what was news today is old news tomorrow.
Mm.
It's the hardest kind of writing to do, but we're going to have some new pieces coming out, and I'm hoping that within the next year we can have a major publication out again.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Beautiful. All right, well, family, join me back here, same time, same place. Next week, I'm going to have on another intellectual warrior scholar, Baba Mwalimu Baruti. He just dropped
Oh,
a book. And so Baba Baruti is going to come on next week
mhm.
at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much, family, for tuning in. Peace, love, and light. See you next
Ashe.
weekend.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classics. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.
See the right